This office building does not have an individual air conditioner for each room. Instead, it has one large air conditioner, which is part of a central air conditioning system. This is the outdoor unit where heat is released. Through the grill, you can see a large fan which blows air across the condenser coils. Inside the building, in this unit, are the cooling coils. A fan circulates air from the cooling coils up through the metal ductwork to the various rooms. In each room, there are two sets of vents. Near the floor are vents through which the cool air is blown into the room. As the cool air absorbs heat from the room, it becomes lighter and rises toward the ceiling. Having absorbed heat from the room, the air reaches another set of vents, where the air is drawn out of the room to be cooled once again. This animated drawing shows how the air circulates through the room. We call this process convection. Convection currents like these are also found in a room having an individual air conditioner. This is how warm air is brought to the air conditioner to be cooled and recirculated.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this week on Did You Know, the ESCO HVAC show. So today we're spending some time, you got a tongue twister here, spending time with Todd Titus.
Yeah.
How's it going, Todd?
Hey, not too bad. Thanks, Clifton. Appreciate you having me on and getting to talk to everybody. This is a great introduction video and always great to get back to the basics.
It's a lot of fun. When we're talking about what's happening in the industry, we spend so much time talking about the equipment and refrigerants. We don't always cover every aspect of the HVAC industry as well as we should. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to spend more time looking at the struggles that everyone is facing currently. And so, Todd, you're the Director of State Government Affairs with HARDI, correct?
Yep, that is correct.
And HARDI is the Heating, Air Conditioning, Refrigeration Distributors International. So you really work with all of the HVAC distributors across the U.S.
I mean, all that are members, but if, HARDI's lucky enough to have a large membership base and cover a lot of the industry as far as a distributor perspective. So yeah, we definitely have our hands in, for me, in every single state, and then also throws you a lot into those municipalities sometimes as well. So a lot of stuff going on crossing up in all 50 states. And then we also, not to forget that we also still doing all the work out in DC on the Capitol Hill with the federal government as well.
And that's the important part, is to understand what's happening, not just from the federal perspective, but from the individual states, because all of the different aspects that we keep talking about, whether it is a refrigerant transition, whether it is a equipment transition, whether it's an efficiency standard, yeah, we have federal initiatives and we have federal standards, but a lot of times we have states that are going in their own directions. And it's hard to stay on top of that. And that's where it really is helpful having someone who works in that realm to help explain what's happening around the United States.
Yeah, no, there's definitely a large volume. And I mean, I would say there's probably more volume than what we originally thought when we started the rule. So if you take a step back to pre-2024, that's when HARDI initially made the expansion to include state affairs.
Okay.
Was just really a one-man operation with our Vice President Alex Ayers, for Vice President of Government Affairs Alex Ayers, handling states, handling federal government. So he's dealing with the EPA, the DOE, all those changes going on, and then he was also making sure that states that were pushing their climate agendas, such as California, New York, all these more progressive states, and then also those non-progressive ones that are doing some backtracking, like potential ones like Missouri or other ones that are changing their building codes that way. He's in charge of doing things like that. So it became enough that HARDI was able to forecast what was coming down the pipeline as far as state advocacy issues. So they created the position. I was hired, and in February of 2024, we officially had a state affairs department. And from the state affairs perspective, we immediately jumped into playing catch up with between 300 and 400 issues at a time each year, from your low, medium, and high priorities. Obviously, you're not going to say there's 300 high priorities at a time, but they're all impactful to a degree. Whether you need to have awareness to adjust your buildings with heat illness prevention for a warehouse, with that lower, just making sure you're aware to make sure you're following the protocols, all the way up to your high priorities of having an individual refrigerant transition for a very specific state. So there's tons of variabilities and things in there that can always keep you on your toes. And you have individual state sessions, disclosures, lobbying disclosures, lobbying regulations thing. It's very individual, pocket by pocket, state by state that has to go on. But we've hit the ground running. We've expanded in 24, but then we went and continued to expand just last year with adding public affairs advocacy with Madison Romero, and she's done a great job with helping us. I mean, introduced us as well, so as to allow me to be on here with you. And then we then recently expanded just a few months ago and added building and codes and rebates with Zach Johnson, who is leading our senior policy lead, who's working very diligently and very quickly, having to hit the ground running himself because Washington's having building codes and he's working on model codes and all these things that are going to be adopted across the country. And then on top of that, we want to make sure we're better with rebates to pass that information down to contractors. So he's making sure he's getting information like that. So a lot of everything I just went over wasn't there when you rewind just 2.5 years ago. This is all new in the last 2.5 years for HARDI.
Very important for the industry too, and very timely. When we think about things even as simple as like the incentives and rebates, they're all over the board right now. And with their current administration, there are things that have been chopped. And so you've had some states pick up the additional weight of that and have offered better incentives through different programs. A lot of our energy utilities have also stepped up and helped assist with that. So yeah, I could see where that's absolutely a full-time job. Just keep up with where we are.
And rebates are so important with the awareness side of it. By being the association representing distributors and with the access to be able to pass that information to the contractors quickly and efficiently. It's really important that we have that information for the distributor to be able to pass that along, because it's not always as effective for you to be getting that directly from your utility or directly from the energy office for your state. They don't always get that outreach that we're able to get as an association and the contractor to the distributor relationship.
And that's a big deal going forward. When we start talking about things like high performance heat pumps, as we start talking about this transition into heat pump water heaters, there's going to be a lot of buzz, and there's going to be a lot of communication and likely a significant amount of miscommunication. And that's where we make sure that we bring the correct people onto the show from our industry to talk about what's happening. So I hope you all are intrigued with this. I'm an HVAC nerd, so just about anything HVAC, I am ready to learn and ready to listen. And so I encourage you to hang in with us, and hopefully you'll get a better perspective of what's going on around the country. So Todd, where do we begin? Like, what things do we think we need to start with? Because there's so many things that we could discuss that probably won't, I don't even know if we get to all of it in one show.
Well, like we kind of already started into a little bit. I mean, I just kind of wanted to give everyone a better understanding about who HARDI is exactly.
Sure.
We're a lot more than just an advocacy organization. Yes, that's where I live in my world. So it's easy for me to talk about that, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. But it's not to talk about what we're exactly as an entire association there. For those that aren't aware of who HARDI is, we're there to make sure that the wholesale distributors are the channel of choice for not just the manufacturers to distribute it into or sell into, but then for the contractors to buy from as that supplier to the contractor. So we do that through several different avenues. So events with our fly-in congressional, some state advocacy days for some complex issues within states, but then we have that government affairs and advocacy side of things. From that, though, we also have trainings that we put out there in industry content with our market intelligence team. So we have a talent education piece to it, as well as that market intelligence tool to make sure that our HARDI members are well prepared with their baselines and selling things with the right price and being prepared for their forecasting. And then not to sell short, one of the things that we're always really proud and interested to learn about is our Latin America division and the membership that drives all the international growth that we have as an association. We're not just held into the states that I do a lot of advocacy in, but then we're outside of that in Latin America with several other countries involved with our Latin America division. We shorthand to LATAM. And then obviously there's some numbers if you are interested to know exactly who we represent throughout with the number of members, whether it be manufacturer or wholesale and otherwise.
I'm glad you mentioned
But
the entire Latin community. We actually have Osvaldo joining us from Belize today. He's on almost every week, just paying attention to what's happening here in the States. So welcome, Osvaldo.
yeah, no, but I'm telling them to make sure to reach out to a HARDI's Latin America division and see if there's anything we can do to connect there. We have a great director over there with Guy, so we'll have to get those two connected. But yeah, no, and then as we have our general mission, there's our government affairs has one ourselves. We're always advocating for those wholesale distributors and make sure they can operate their business and serve the partners and be that channel of choice. So that kind of perspective of government affairs and how, Clifton, the way that we kind of have talked pre-show, a little bit of like, what do you want to talk about? Well, it can be a lot of different things. Obviously, they think immediately to what's the hot button issue. So you tend to think EPA, you tend to think DOE, some labor concerns, decarbonization efforts, things like that are risk level. But the way that you have to look at policy is much more like an iceberg. And I'll give him credit because I steal this from him. It's our VP's image here, but I steal it because it's just such a great analogy. Is that there's always so much deeper underneath the surface of how you look at things, because there's not the hot button. There's refrigerant transitions. There's the safety standards. There's building codes. There's the things that you don't think about that affect your equipment on a daily basis that we have to make sure we're advocating for. Otherwise, if we just stay at the surface level, we might not have equipment to sell. And that's kind of one of the lead us right into the hot button topics that we're going to I was thinking we could talk about today, which was California Energy Commission's reporting mandate and HARDI's alternative proposal to kind of get the word out there about that. And then I also want to talk a little about the ultra low GWP and the proposals, task forces, reports, and some adopted policies that are actually trying to implement a transition that industry doesn't seem ready for or wanting at this point.
It's crazy. And we should, if we don't understand that, particularly as technicians, contractors, even distributors, it is going to move into our realm, I think, faster than anticipated. I just finished a podcast about an hour or so ago with a tool manufacturer, and they are already ramping up all of their tool production and design for ultra low GWP products, and just anticipating that it's going to be ahead of schedule.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic, and there's it can get controversial and heated, no pun intended, very quickly.
That's all right. We're here to cool them down, Todd. That's what we're going to do.
All right. But not to get too into ultra low, I would love to talk about the California area first, because I think this is something that no one is really aware of, and it can have effects. Like, even if it's the contractors listening, it will affect your day-to-day business, because in the name of all things permit compliance, the California Energy Commission is out. They, in an effort to improve just permit compliance, they're saying it's something else, but in an effort to improve permit compliance, they're trying to create a report for wholesale distributors and online retailers. So it's not just your wholesalers that you purchase from, but basically anyone who's selling your space conditioning and your water heating, so your heat pumps and other air conditioning equipment, as well as your water heaters. They will be required to report the equipment type, contractor name, your business, your license number, your equipment model, your equipment maker, brand, manufacturer, and the number of units sold and the date of that transaction, just so that they can track you down to make sure that permit is pulled. That is the entire intention behind it. And this is an actual proposed, the language is out there. They've done 3 RFIs. They're in the middle of the 3rd one right now. And I mentioned it and we've met with them. They have not walked off from this. They've adjusted to remove from one of the required pieces of data to be reported, but there's still several red lines that are just dangerous for a business to give out. Essential business is out there, and most of this is not easy for a distributor to pull together to disclose, let alone the business to disclose. So let's think about it from the systems that a wholesale distributor uses in there with an ERP. It's that not everyone has the same. These are massive customized systems, so they're not able to just pull this information right away. They have to. So saying that they're going to be able to plug these numbers in and report like it's nothing is completely false. Some might not have an ERP system. Some might be doing some old school paperwork and some other kind of more basic systems on the way they operate their business, which then makes it even more complicated to pull this data. So now we're thinking about accountants, we're thinking about lawyers, we're thinking about all the possible additional staff and contracts that are going to have to be pulled and be employed just to be able to handle a regulation environment that the California government's trying to force on. And then this is the best part of it is you're going to face penalties if you don't. So not only are they going to be put at risk with disclosure of information, but then they're going to penalize you for not disclosing your customer list, the single most valuable thing a distributor.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think about other places like some of the big box shops. How do they fall into something like that? That are selling.
They would be required to report as well. Your Home Depot, the Lowe's, those would still fall under that.
In that same category. Wow. Yeah. Todd just made a great comment about the privacy and the administrative concerns. When just from our side of things, looking from the ESCO eyes, we can't disclose that information. There's confidentiality clauses there that we, bind to our consumer, our audience that brings up a whole bunch of legal concern.
There's a lot more going on than what a simple reporting mandate would put out there. And then,
right,
a distributor to contractor relationship that everyone takes very seriously. This is not something you take lightly. You have dedication is something that you go to. If your same grocery store you go to, you likes know when you know the name when you walk into a store, things like that. And you build that relationship up and you build that trust and you find that trusted always go to whenever you need that part, component, whatever it may be for your on a timely need and basis. Well, if they start doing this, you're getting reported because say you're getting audited for some permit and you're going to know it's because you got ratted out by from over here. Yeah. And it's like, no, the distributor is being put under this reporting mandate but the feeling is being policed by my distributor. So even though the same other distributor you would have to move over to if you left them is still also reporting, the feeling is still you got betrayed. So now they're staining relationships that you're trying to build in a business to business world.
Yeah, I see.
And then
people.
This is all distributor perspective.
Online purchasing
and this is all distributor perspective. If we could take a step back to makes this pretty bad too, which is this is a disclosure of market shares. There are guidelines that take very seriously and follow to a T to make sure that market share data does not get out there. And now California themselves have access to that market share data.
Yeah, I could see where, especially for HARDI, this becomes a hot topic and a lot of energy getting focused onto it. When are they anticipating this to actually happen?
So the comments are open until 4th. So if people wanted to submit a comment, HARDI has a grassroots advocacy center that anybody in the industry, manufacturer, distributor, or contractor in California could go to. They can submit a comment. It's a very simple process. If you click I believe we have a QR code that can come up on the screen as well to let people know about it. If you scan that QR code, you'll go to HARDI's Grassroots Advocacy Center. You'll see a list of all the campaigns we have open. Feel free to participate in any that affect you because we designed this to an advocacy tool that anybody in the industry can use. So if you go there, you visit the center, click on whatever you would like to participate in if it affects you. Because there's some federal ones on there as well that affects everybody. But for California one specifically, if you're going to click on it, view it, use name, email address, and because they got to make sure you're in California, and then just type in what you want to type in about your opinion and how business, and hit submit. It will take maybe 5 minutes, and you're submitting a comment and making a difference to help defend your industry. And this is, like I said, for this one, you can do them for all of them, but we would greatly appreciate your input for this issue.
Well, Todd, you just brought up something I had not thought about and not actually realized about HARDI in the past. Because I was in the distributor side. I was with Johnstone Supply for about 5 years. Very familiar with HARDI from that perspective. I'd never thought about HARDI as being an advocate for the boots on the ground, for the contractors. And so you're actually putting these links available for industry input then.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. We can do, Hardy is by being a association, you're sitting in the middle of having, our membership and our focus will always be the distributor. But
Yes.
we have to make sure that anything we can do to help, whether it be contractors, we're improving the customer bases. If we're helping anything and supporting our manufacturer association partners that we collaborate with often, and we'll get to that low GWP topic, that collaboration more so. Anything we do to help them is then helping the distributor, because then that's what they're, the product they're selling. So we're sitting in a unique world where we have a primary focus, but then we can have some secondary focuses, because it still goes back to helping our primary focus at the distributor level. It's a great tool. We were very happy to get it put together through our legislative activity, and who we talked about these campaigns together to make sure that those get put there for industry advocates and our membership to access and make it simple to be a part of creating these advocacy problems, because it shouldn't be something on your day-to-day life that you have to track and be worried about. That's what HARDI and associations are for. You can't do your entire daily job and then also be reading legislation and making these activities and taking part in all this stuff. So we simplify it and make it for you to be a part of the solution with your best interests at heart through this program.
Well, Todd, I can't tell you how excited I am for this. I didn't realize that was a part of HARDI. We get phone calls every single day about hot topics within the industry, especially from those that feel like they have never had a voice in the situations. We always tell them, hey, you always have the opportunity to input, whether it comes through the Federal Register, wherever it's coming through, there's always an opportunity for industry input. You just have to know where to look for it. And there's not been a common place to do that. So I would be happy to dive deeper into this later and send out some emails and social media blasts, because that is a huge opportunity for the industry to voice their opinion on the direction of our industry.
Right. No, I couldn't agree more, and that's why I went into it. And if you go, that kind of leading up to the California Energy Commission thing, why we need the comments to submit is because they're shooting for this permit compliance. They're shooting to
Right.
Instead of going after the root of the problem, they're going to force permit compliance onto the to achieve the permit compliance of contractors. They're going to force the policing of the distributors, right? The root problems. But if we can submit some grassroots initiative comments from industry, then we can get an alternative proposal that helps to stop this problem. And it's actually a very simple thing that we've talked with our membership about. It's about taking a third-party aggregated approach and use a clearinghouse model to where these distributors and online retailers use their furnaces, air conditioners, and water heaters transaction data that they have to report. We reduce worded and we send it to an aggregator and anonymizer, and then they produce that annual report that is anonymous and aggregated, and then they provide that to CEC, and that's just give you your units sold, equipment type, fuel type, efficiency tier, refrigerant class. That's all the info we get.
That's all they need.
Exactly, that's all the information they need to achieve their goal of permit compliance, because that can give them the information all the way down to the zip code, or not to the zip code, I'm sorry, down to the county. We can't go to the zip code. That wouldn't be right. But you can go all the way down to the county, and by going all the way to the county, what permits are getting pulled in that county that should have been, that aren't, and such.
The equipment sold.
Exactly. And by have the CSL be able to look at each other and then take action with whether it be warnings generally to all contractors, and that should be sufficient if a problem in that county.
Right. Yeah, then it gives them the opportunity to break it down by county. I see what they're wanting to do, and it makes sense, but how they're going about is not beneficial for the contractor or the distributor.
And our market intelligence team has a program that has established a reporting program called the unitary report that uses a third-party clearinghouse model. We never see the data that comes in, but we kind of came up on an existing program. Now, we're not saying use that program, but we're saying because we know this works and it keeps the information safe, this is something we can create a new program off of, and we see to establish.
Here's our model.
Yep.
Perfect. Yeah, so fascinating. Very fascinating.
This is what we're pushing for. Yeah, so it's we found an area where it's not saying that you have a lot of industry and stakeholder opposition, but I'm not going to say we have industry and stakeholder support now. The opposition and still achieve your goal. It's the clear and obvious, simple solution.
Very cool. I never thought about what HARDI does from that state level like that. I'm glad you're explaining it, because it makes sense. I see very quickly just in this conversation, what HARDI does for the industry as a whole.
It's always we always look at the image we use on some other slides that talks about the way you have to look at policy. You got to look at the product itself, and then you have to look at kind of like the business, and then from that you get your total policy. So it's the product and how you get the product and the business of it. So by putting those together, you get your total policy perspective and engagement of the industry.
Okay, super cool. That's some great, fantastic education.
Yeah, and of course, as we're going through these things, I was going to say, if there people have questions, I've seen them kind of pop up there at the bottom. I kind of addressed the privacy question that popped up. So if anyone has other questions, I'm happy to answer them too. Yes, Todd, it would reduce the reporting burden slightly, because we've shown we found ways that we can work with systems. So the burden kind of has changed. So because, like I said, we kind of have our existing program that's optional, that some members take advantage of. We found that a way to make it work simple and efficient, as burdensome, and then you still get benefits out of. This would be kind of along that same process, and then you can develop it to where maybe there's a benefit out of it, like we use it for the unitary report that we put together. Maybe there's a kind of style you can run with that too. It's about the confidentiality, the risk that comes out of it, because, for example, the second RFI for this CEC rulemaking came out in December of 2025. In November of 2025, their emergency Red 1 system in California was hacked, and all the member signups, information, names, addresses, emails was all leaked and taken by a cyber criminal. Just a month before they're claiming that they would have the ability to maintain confidential information safely in a secure database, they were hacked. So it's not like the emergency Red 1 system is like some gold mine of information that it would be I would expect it to be of the similar security level that they would take this information and data. So, and names, address, email addresses is no different to me than a customer list of a distributor. And if that's leaked to a cyber criminal and put out online, now all of a sudden there's a list of customer lists for every distributor to try to poach from. I'm just putting a business hat on. Like, if I knew a customer was available out there, it's just one of those situations. And that's something that's best kept internal, or at worst given to a third party aggregator.
Wow. Yeah, for sure.
So no, and I'm happy to come back to this if people think of a question later on. Also, I'll have my email address at the end of these slides. If anyone wants to email and talk about it, happy to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure there will be later, those that are coming back to watch that'll want to learn more about what's happening.
Well, and at that point, we get to go to Clifton's favorite topic, from my understanding.
It is.
So, this kind of talk about, because I kind of call 2027 the year of ultra low. It's kind of like where everything's coming together to kind of be where there's maybe 3 states, at least for now, could be more, but 3 states that are at the forefront of ultra low GWP policies. And for those that might not be aware, Ultra low means your grillable warming potential, GWP, is less than 10.
10.
So, so when you think less than 10, you think about what refrigerants are actually going to be available out there. You know, what is available for when you think about only below 10, and that's your carbon dioxide, your ammonia, and propane. You know, and my mind jumps to residential. You know, there are applications for some of these in primarily industrial and commercial situations, but the commercial tends to be large at this time, but in refrigeration. But I think residential, because I think that's the main application in order for you to get wide acceptance for these things, for these refrigerants. But think residential, the applications for these. Ammonia, you know, it used to be used back in the, I think it was the 80s when it was used, and they were having leak problems and people were having serious health concerns, potential death, lung damage from it. And for that reason, we stopped using it, because one breath of an ammonia leaking into a home or next to it, you're going to have permanent lung damage or death. So for that reason, building code standards and safety standards of equipment don't allow ammonia. Then you move over to your propane. It's obviously, we all know it's an A3 explosive refrigerant, but and even though the technology may exist to hold it, leaks and other concerns don't allow it for your building code standards or your safety standards.
Oh,
and
absolutely not.
I think a lot of people don't know about it with propane is we're all used to, Cliff, I don't know if you're, I know you're in India, we're both Indiana guys, so there's a lot of gas used in homes out there. So, propane, when you think about gas at a home, it has that rotten egg smell from chemical added to it. And the problem is when you circulate in a closed loop with propane for a refrigerant at that temperature and that pressure inside the system, that chemical detaches from it, and it's not able to stay attached to the propane as a refrigerant. So if there is a leak in the system, we haven't found a way to make it have even a smell to know for safety if it's there. So that means you would have odorless propane leaking either into or adjacent to a home. And for that reason, it's also illegal for building code and safety standards. Your UL and your IECC does not allow it, does not allow propane as a residential refrigerant. And then it goes to carbon dioxide, your last one. That one, it's not about legality for code standards at that point or safety standards. It comes down to technology. In order to use CO2 as a pressure, or CO2 as a refrigerant, it requires massive pressure. Our current systems for your R32 systems, they operate around 200 PSI. That's about where we're at right now with most systems. They operate around 200. Now, if you want to use carbon dioxide as a refrigerant, you're operating around, I think it's around 1400 PSI. And that's really a ton of pressure for when you put it into perspective. Think about us being at 200. And, I don't know if you know this or not, but if you go up just a little bit higher, around 1700 PSI, I think that was where the 3 mile, or that's enough pressure to crush a nuclear submarine. The reported depth of a submarine to crush is 1700. And then you go up to 2400 PSI. That's the 3 Mile Island nuclear meltdown. That's what occurred for the nuclear meltdown in Pennsylvania back in the 80s. I think it was 80s. So when you think about the context of the kind of pressure we're talking about, that's why CO2 is being used in residential right now. It's the technology has to catch up to carbon dioxide as an option. And until that happens, we're kind of the mindset that this isn't even a conversation yet. If the technology isn't available, we don't need to put a timeline on it. We shouldn't be putting a timeline on something and expecting it to be, and hope that the technology exists in time for the policy, in order for the policy to be enacted correctly. Because not only does it have to exist, it also has to be produced. And there's always manufacturing lines that have to then come into play as well. So,
well, I'd heard about the New York GWP of 10. I hadn't realized there were other states that were following suit with that. So that could escalate in a hurry, because we don't have, especially residential light commercial, we don't have products available that actually meet those standards.
Yeah. So I mean, we've all heard of ammonia kind of being used. I think it's really common in the industrial space around data centers. And then obviously CO2 is picking up with some popularity in the commercial refrigeration space. But that New York really shed some light with its dates, and I'll go in more depth with it in a little bit. But they really shed light of us understanding the costs and how CO2, even though the technology exists for commercial refrigeration, specifically supermarkets, that just because it exists doesn't mean it's feasible for adoption, because of, like you talk about rebates and costs of all these efficiency tiers, adjusting and ripping out entire systems in order to accommodate the high pressures that are required for CO2 from your 454B, or not 454Bs, I'm sorry, 404A, 507A. Those are, those can be, business ending.
Millions, tens of millions of dollars.
Yeah, you have to prepare for that kind of stuff. And if you spring something like that on someone like a New York supermarket, especially the independent ones in the food desert areas that exist right now, upstate, it can be devastating. So, to give you an idea, I moved the slide over to show the 3 states right now that are looking at ultra low GWP policies in the states. So New York, they have the adopted one, like you kind of talked about. The entire state, there's transitions, but the entire state will be ultra low GWP beginning in 2034. January 1, 2034, every single sector will be ultra low GWP. Then you go over to California. They're a little behind on releasing the report that's going to have the ultra low GWP feasibility. That'll then allow a policy to then follow afterwards, a policy making for it. So, but we're expecting either late this year. I'm kind of thinking it's going to come out in December, just in time for the legislative session and the process of early January or early 2027. And then there's also Washington, who is just in the last session of 2025, they passed House Bill 1462 that told the Department of Ecology for Washington to create a task force that is going to create a recommendation of a transition plan for the legislator to then act in the 2028 session with low and ultra low GWP transition for refrigerant. Now, keep in mind, they call GWP there 150. They don't call it. They don't say low GWP and mean A2Ls. When they say low GWP, they mean 150. So that itself is going to be a conversation, let alone the ultra low GWP of that task force.
It's interesting to see how separated and segregated our entire industry is around the country. And, we hear different aspects of, what's happening in states, but it's nice to be able to sit down with a organization that is focusing on all of these topics all at once. It's got to be a lot of work.
Yeah, ultra low GWP was kind of the process of like with New York's, for example. That one I was hired February of 2024. The public comment period for the Part 494 rulemaking for New York started in March 2024. So I've known little else when I first started other than ultra low GWP.
I could see that. Well, we're going to get it along great because I follow the equipment, trying to understand, like, when do we think we'll be able to start considering that in the United States. And then you see actions like this and you go, okay, well, the industry is not ready for that.
And there's also, a great, I wish I would have got the QR code ready for you, but it was, we have great reports. If you go to the HARDI website and you go to our learning center on the top tab, we have great report that and press releases talking about ultra low GWP feasibility around some polling we did for New Yorkers to understand it. We did it we also had some information for the cost effectiveness for a supermarket to adopt ultra low GWP, specifically CO2 systems. Yeah, so there you go, right at the learning center, right there. And you go to your news and articles, and then you can go to the search bar and just type right there on the left one there. Oh, down to the left, right there. If you just type in New York, you'll find some press releases and some other information based around this topic. So if you scroll down a little bit there, go down a little bit more.
Oh, wow.
So you'll see these changes that are going on within New York from their budget changes and how that affected the GWP 20 being removed to measure GWP 100 there. Oh, wow. Then you also see there's a survey there.
And so this would be a public survey.
Yeah, it's a press release, so it is. And then you also, if you go down a little bit farther, you'll see another information out there that was put out for the based on the ban and some other DEC regulation from Part 494 that was going to go in effect from press releases. No, not press releases. I'm sorry. There are press releases, but then also press conferences that we had and information that we've been working on for this New York. So as you can see, we're working very hard to work on this issue in New York. So there's a lot of information out there for this. If anyone want to go out there, talk about it from our website.
Yeah, I will definitely be spending some time myself going through. That's a lot of content that, like I said, we never really thought of, at least personally, I haven't thought of HARDI as being that centralized place for the general consumer. Always thought about it for the distributor, but for the, not the consumer, but the contractor, that's a ton of information.
Yeah, and it's at the end of the day, we want to make sure that the contractor is getting the information from the distributor, because the distributor is the one-stop shop source for all things contractor based. So we always want to make sure we're empowering the distributor. But at the end of the day, we got to put that information out there too, for the distributor not to find. But doing that is also press release and public information. So you'll find us doing a lot more of that. And that was a big piece of when Madison came in and joined the team on the ABSI front. She's put on 2 press conferences in a matter of 1 month. That we're branching out in the ways that we communicate this information and changing it to be whatever we think best fits the time and situation.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, you're speaking so much to the choir here. Jason Abjit from our time, just he lives and Howard does as well, lives in the Federal Register and is constantly looking for things that are changing. And so I see a lot of opportunities for us to share this information, with the industry in general. We have educators that come to us looking for, what's happening in my area, and ESCO's, that's not our work. We try to deliver the information when we see it, but yet we have HARDI here sharing it with all of you. So we'll make sure that you all spend time getting to know the HARDI website a little bit better.
Yeah, definitely welcome everyone to check it out, and always be willing to ask questions. I'm always available, right. and whether it be from the website or here right now or whatever it may be. But on the topic of New York and everything, I kind of had wanted to dive a little bit more deeper into what exactly is the Part 494 policy from the DEC, or the Department of Environmental Conservation, that they made, and kind of just a very simple overview of what it may be, or what it is it's broken down into these boxes. Okay, you have an implementation side and you have an enforcement side. And the reason I wanted to talk about this a little bit more detail with you is this is probably the framework that we're going to see other states do if they pursue it. So Part 494 was pushed through against industry opposition. It was not really changed much from the adoption and presentation that it received in that March 2024 timeframe. There was massive opposition against it, but nothing really changed. It was pushed through. So this is what we expect if the adversaries to the industry had it their way when didn't take an input into account. Your implementation side is going to have what we all are used to, in that middle high GWP block, we're all used to there. That's basically your technology transition for that specific state. So imagine just the TT rule that the EPA issues. That's what that is. You look to your left at the bulk virgin refrigerant ban. In order to enforce the high GWP equipment transition, and then also the ultra low GWP later on, they're going to ban the use of virgin refrigerants and force reclaim usage. Now, the thing that's really important to remember is not every market has an amazing reclaim supply available.
So true.
And this is across the nation, but it's also in New York. So like a great example of this is what we were talking about with the 407A and the 504A, and talking about supermarkets. Those are the 2 most common refrigerants in supermarkets right now. If you were to take every single piece of reclaimed of those 2 refrigerants and bring it to the state of New York, you would get 1 million pounds of it. We did a study on this. You would get 1 million pounds of it. But in the state of New York, in order to service every single piece of supermarket equipment, your bodegas, convenience stores, that commercial refrigeration, you need 1.1 million pounds. So you can't even service everything in a year, even if you had everything in the country brought there. So it's the feasibility of these things are not matching together, thinking it's just a match 1 for 1. So and it's just the numbers don't line up, but you push it through thinking it's just because it's the right thing, we have to do it. There's times and situations, and the reason we do transitions in this industry. So you're going to ban the bulk virgin use of these cylinders, force the reclaim.
Oh, I think.
Did I lose you there for a second?
Yep, now you're back.
Oh, sorry about that.
Nope.
But no, I was talking about the bulk virgin use.
Yeah, so they'll be banning the bulk.
Yeah, if you do that, you're going to force reclaim, and if the reclaim isn't available, then you're going to be moving into you're going to force the transition, because if you have no refrigerant because the reclaim's not available, now you're going to have to install the new equipment. So that new lower GWP, and then eventually ultra low GWP, and that transition is going to begin. Actually, they have some equipment such as 2027 of January 1, but then there's also January 2034 for everything. So over the next 7 years, starting in January, we're going to see ultra low GWP at this time going on in New York. But like I said, there was a lot of content that you went through on that slide to show that we're not giving up easily on the fight, as far as just saying ultra low GWP is a thing in New York. The big thing to keep in mind is that there is an ongoing lawsuit that HARDI and AHRI are jointly filed against the DEC. We filed this on April 9th of 2025 against the DEC against Part 494 and their ultra low GWP transition. The lower court, which in New York, the lower court is called the Supreme Court. Don't know why, but the Supreme Court of New York did rule in favor of the DEC. But HARDI and AHRI, we did appeal it. So now we're in the appellate division of the 3rd District with that appeal going on right now. So at the time where it is, we filed our appeal. We're waiting on a response brief from the DEC. And then once we receive the response brief, we submit a reply brief to their response. And then once that happens, there will be a date set for oral arguments in this fall. And then after oral arguments occur, the appellate division judges will make a decision. And then, whatever that decision may be, whoever it's in favor of, will determine next course of actions, or any course of actions to be taken. If we are successful, we'll have the Part 494 will be removed, and DEC and the rest of the state will follow the the federal transition as it stands today.
We've already heard from contractors in New York that are struggling just to get 404 service gas because of the miscommunication that is happening on this, that it's not final, but there are, I imagine, non-HARDI distributors that are already cutting off supply of R404 and stockpiling it to specific contractors, not understanding exactly what's happening in this realm. So we've already seen definitely a 404 shortage in New York from the commercial grocery sector.
Yeah, that was the defiling.
Yep.
It was stockpiling because the DEC set a virgin ban that I discussed, and they put the date to go into effect January 9th of 2025 after the rule was adopted on December 24th, Christmas Eve of 2024. So between two holidays and what, 10 days or 14 days, if that, you have to, while you're with family and everything else, all of a sudden you're about to have an entire supply of refrigerant and everything else just
disappear,
be banned. So people were stockpiling because stockpiling is permitted. Distributor is not allowed to sell to a contractor, but if a contractor purchases it and stores it themselves, then they would be allowed to have it at that point. So that's what was going on. So you have distributors that were just buying to then sell very quickly before, and to make sure everyone was okay and stock up. But then what happened was they issued an enforcement discretion delaying that rule, or that enforcement of 404A and 507A. Then they did an enforcement discretion again because they realized people just couldn't couldn't comply.
Mm-hmm.
And before you knew it, they delayed it all the way out to March 31st of this year. But, and we asked for another enforcement discretion at the beginning of this year saying, we're still not going to be able to comply with this because based on the study, I hinted at telling you about those numbers with the 1 million to 1.1, just saying reclaim market's still not there. And they said, too bad, we can't keep enforcement discretion. They didn't give us, they did not share written notice. They gave us a phone call and that was it. So we were like, okay, well, we're gonna file for an injunction because the lawsuit's going on. Because while this lawsuit's still going on, we can get an injunction, potentially get an injunction to delay this rule for the duration of this appeal. And that would be it's still not going to be enough time to establish reclaim, but it's going to make sure that the rule doesn't go into effect and then all of a sudden get deleted if we're successful on the appeal. So we filed for the injunction. We were able to get it, which means 404A and 507A in New York, Virgin is still allowed all the way until our appeal is finished, which
no kidding,
likely be probably sometime either later this year or early next year. All depends on the process. So we were successful in that. And we're hoping that, fingers crossed that the injunction is a sign of good things to come in that appeal.
So for all of you out there that participated in that little area of non-availability of R404, you can thank HARDI and AHRI for their efforts making that happen. Fascinating. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, that when you go back and you're digging through there, you'll see some press releases about it.
Mm-hmm. Very cool.
But it's a really interesting topic, and I as we kind of start to run short on time here, I've got about 8 minutes left. I think is ultra low GWP is not a thing right now. We think about how successful, it's hard to call it a success because we had a lot of hiccups and some things that happened with the A2L transition. You think about the 454B, and I understand all those things that happened, but generally we did a good job. Just because there's a 454B shortage, I don't think the industry, contractors, distributors, manufacturers, I don't think we all pat ourselves on the back enough to understand how well this transition was executed from 2020 to now.
I agree.
Even knowing how well that all went, looking back and the difficulties that may have been, do you really want to do it again? I mean, we went from using thousands and thousands high GWP to now being under 700 with your around 580, 600, truthfully, with your residential.
Mm-hmm.
And commercial is going to be under 150 in no time before we mostly. And do we really need to get below 10? Is the struggles and expense of everything to go below 10 really necessary that we need to set a regulation? Or can we not just allow the natural transition of technology and improvements that we originally had back when the Kigali amendments were being made to improve from R22 and R12, just allow it to take course before regulations were there? I think that's a perfectly feasible way to look at it, because as of right now, HARDI's stance is we don't need another transition. That's not in the cards at this time. And that's why we're fighting this legally and pursuing legislative action that would help correct New York to align with the rest of the country and what we think is a great policy, despite the current EPA filing that we have. We weren't a fan of the commercial side of things, but we got some 410A relief out of that, and that was the important thing. We were pushed right.
But believe me, Jason and Howard and I, the whole team, we sat through all of the EPA updates going, okay, another update? Really? Couldn't we have just started with, an understanding of where we are and what the potential is? Sounds like if EPA and HARDI would have sat down and been pretty clear of what we could do and what we can't as an industry.
Well, we did have communication with them, and we had a lot of communication for that 410A that came through. That was a big talking point that we had for our congressional fly-in, where our members went out to DC and had meetings. So we like to think that was a big reason for that push that we made. But then there was also the commercial side of it with the refrigeration was not something that we were pushing for. And as you can see from the several filings that occurred from the industry side and associations against the EPA. So not to get, that's a whole nother topic, but I'm happy to connect the dots for you on that one on another episode sometime.
Sounds like a great podcast topic.
Yeah. But I mean, thinking about other things going on, I think ultra low GWP, and I know you were excited for the slide when I told you, hey, I got something for you at the end, is I think I think ultra low GWP in the pursuit from those adversaries of our industry, I think that is a workaround in order. I think they're using ultra low GWP. They want, that's their end goal, but in order to get that, they're using a workaround of PFAS to achieve that goal. Because if you really think about it, a PFAS prohibition for our industry, specifically the refrigerant, creates the same outcome as your ultra low GWP transition in New York and other places if they were to implement it.
Okay.
And it just so happens to also be the same people pushing for the ultra low GWP transition that are pushing for the ban of PFAS within our refrigerants. And then on top of everything else they're doing, they're not just pushing for PFAS generally across the board. They're specifically going after refrigerant and only refrigerant in several of these instances when you have these conversations with them. Well, granted, I'm only going to be talking about that anyway, but I'm having that's tends to be what they will not budge on in some of these rooms I've been in. And they disagree with every objective international government study that says refrigerants do not need to be regulated under PFAS prohibitions. And in response to doing that, they fund and issue their own study in an attempt to support some infeasible opinion. Because we're talking about the UN, the EU REACH, EPA, SNAP, all these things say that refrigerant does not need to be, refrigerant's not PFAS. It should be exempt. Even over in Europe and the EU, they exempt refrigerant under PFAS prohibitions. But these entities and adversaries still say, nope, we have to do it. We have to ban PFAS from these prohibitions. And that's why we have things like Minnesota and Maine that are the only two states that have done it so far, but they have an exemption that will lapse. And all of a sudden we're going to have refrigerant disappear in those states.
Todd Clare brought up a question. I was actually sitting here thinking in my brain, this is exactly what they're doing. She kind of alluded to it. By looking at the PFAS regulations, it's almost like they're fighting the same battle on two separate fronts, just waiting to see which one wins.
Well, one is currently going through a lawsuit, and they haven't had it with the other one, so I know which one I would pick.
Wow,
that's the way I kind of look at it.
Yeah.
But I saw Todd put a comment up there. It's like, why are they saying that? And it's the restrictions targeting refrigerant specifically, because that's what they are having. They found success in that avenue.
Right.
If like I said, they're having a legal battle over an ultra low GWP regulation they were able to get through in New York. But if they're not able to get it through, but because they have a legal battle, they're going to have to scoot over and go to these PFAS rules because they were able to get it adopted without a legal battle in Minnesota and without a legal battle in Maine.
Yep. So they have either or depending on what state they're seeking action in.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, if that's their goal is ultra low, there's two avenues to get there at this time.
Wow.
So they're saying in the name of all things justice and safety with PFAS. In that reality, they don't care about that,
right?
Because PFAS technically doesn't have exposure if you're handling the equipment correctly.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, okay. I'm very, very glad you clarified that because it's something that I hadn't put two and two together with the separate initiatives. But yeah, they absolutely are looking at it from if we're going to go for ultra low GWP, we're going to have two different ways to approach it, depending on what state it is.
And when and they're the same conversation of feasibility when you think of building codes, building codes and safety standards. So because you can't, no PFAS prohibition can go into effect if there's no alternatives.
Right.
So it's a never-ending circle, and that. Like I said, that's just one kind of a teaser, I think, for a future podcast episode.
I think so.
Happy to talk PFAS all day long, but then we branched into building codes a little bit there too. And Zach Johnson, our senior policy lead, he's currently fighting an A3 building code battle out in Washington. So there's all kinds of things going on around this ultra low GWP. Like I said, 2027 is the year of ultra low. That is the fight of the year.
Okay. That's going to be on the radar. So we will definitely have to continue conversations and keep the industry updated. So grateful for you spending time with us, and HARDI for allowing you to, to speak to the audience. We have a pretty significant range of our audience. We have educators at secondary, post-secondary. We have technicians, contractors. We have engineers that will pop in. We have manufacturers of equipment that will come to the show because they're getting information from the right sources. So we're super thankful that you've taken the time to hang out with us today. We hadn't even planned on doing a show today. I'm so thankful that everyone did spend time in their day just joining us, talking about this crazy world of HVAC and refrigeration that we are living in. And it's important to have the right sources. It's easy to get the wrong information if it's not being derived from the leaders that are actually working at the forefront of it. And HARDI is obviously right there doing that. So we encourage you all, reach out, learn more about HARDI. We'll definitely have some more topics coming up. And man, yeah, that was just a fantastic conversation, Todd.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate you having me on. And like you said, thank you to everyone who tuned in. It's not easy to always be working on the the 2 days before July 4th and the end of the week. A lot of people take it off, so appreciate it and happy to talk more. And I guess wrap it up with my last words saying happy birthday to America, I guess.
That's exactly right. Happy birthday, America. Well, we thank you all so much for joining us. We hope you learned a little bit more about the intricacies of our industry and the warriors that are at the front line of that battle. And we will continue these conversations on. We'll see you all again next week on Did You Know, the ESCO HVAC show. And everybody have a wonderful holiday weekend. Bye, everybody.